Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Today is the day for the third webinar in our GraphQL webinar series. And today we are going to learn about how to build custom reports with GraphQL. My name is Ruth Reinicke. I work for LeanIX, and with me today is my colleague Patrick Surrey. Now, some of you might have expected my colleague Dominic to be here, but we've actually decided to ask Patrick to do this webinar because he's the true expert on GraphQL in our house. Patrick is a front-end developer at LeanIX, and he focuses mainly on the web interface and the reporting area of LeanIX. So he is well and truly an expert on today's topics. Some of you might have actually experienced his presentation at our recent EA Connect Day, which was on a very similar topic. Now, if you've missed our two previous webinars on GraphQL Basics and Advanced GraphQL, you can actually listen to the recordings. So just drop us an email and we'll send you the link for that. We are also recording today's webinar. So you will receive an email next week with a link to the recording so you can listen to it again and again, and you can also share it with your colleagues if they couldn't attend today. Now, if you've got any questions throughout the webinar, please use the questions function in your user panel to pose these at any time. We will collect them all and answer them after the presentation, and if we run out of time or they're too complex for this webinar, then we will contact you individually. So without further ado, I am actually going to hand you over to Patrick, who will guide you through today's webinar on custom reports with GraphQL.
So, hello everyone. Also,
Hang on, I think we're having a few problems with our sound, so let me quickly try to sort this out. Okay.
test.
Right.
So, can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you now. We'll use this system.
Okay. So, then again, hello from my side. In this presentation, I will show you the reporting framework that we have implemented into our newest release of the LeanIX Pathfinder application. And during this webinar, I will first show you a brief overview over the reporting framework and its features, and then dive into some live coding and show you how easy it is to get started with a simple report. So first, let's take a look at the features. So there are the standard report features that everyone knows from LeanIX that are available for all custom reports. So for example, the facet filtering, which is point 1, this is also available for custom reports. The second feature are the view selections, so that you can show colors depending on attributes and values at your fact sheets. The third point are a tabular view and an Excel export, so each report can define a tabular view, and also these data can be exported to Excel. Then every report can be saved and restored and as well exported as a PDF. The fifth point is that you as a developer get free choice of the technology you want to use to visualize your data. So with the knowledge about GraphQL, you can fetch the data from the LeanIX workspace and show it in the report. So then let's take a look at the reporting framework and how the architecture of it looks. So this basic report consists of two parts, mainly the LeanIX reporting framework is the white part, which is included into our Pathfinder application. And then the report runs inside of an iframe and can do its visualization there. If we dive a level deeper, we see that the LeanIX Pathfinder application talks to a LeanIX reporting library, which is provided by us, as we will see later. And then we have custom report logic running inside the iframe. Here is the logic we have to implement for our report. So let's look at the responsibilities of each of these parts. So the first part is the application, the Pathfinder application, which takes care of authorization, the actual data retrieval from the backend with GraphQL, and also takes care of the filtering. The LeanIX reporting library, which is provided by us, allows you to easily talk to the host. It provides an API for the interaction with the host and some utility functionalities like formatting of numbers or currency or dates. And then finally, there is the custom report logic where you can focus on your visualization and use any web technology that you want for your report. So let's take a look how the workflow, the development workflow looks like. So the first step is that a developer starts developing and testing the report on his or her local machine. If the report is done, it can be uploaded to a LeanIX workspace. By that, you get a link and can share it with anyone who's part of the workspace and can take a look at the report. So if the report then needs to be adjusted, we go back to development and adjust it and can upload it again until it's finished. Then LeanIX will take a look at the report's source code and at the report itself and approve it so that it can then be published to any user of the LeanIX workspace. So now I would actually go into the live demo and develop an example report. So first, let me introduce what we want to build. So the example report I will create during this webinar should answer the following question, which is how well have the different organizational units in our workspace, these are modeled as user groups, maintained their application portfolio. So what I imagine to build is a simple bar chart where each user group is a bar, and the length of the bar says how much is the average completion of the application fact sheets related to that user group. So the length of the bar is determined from the average completion. So what do you need to actually get started now with developing a custom report for LeanIX? So basically you need some beginner skills in web technologies. This means in JavaScript and HTML. And then you need workspace access. So a workspace where you want to develop your report in. This is basically done through an API token, as we will see later. And then you need the documentation of our reporting command line interface, which I will show you now. So I will jump out of the presentation and show you the GitHub page of the LeanIX reporting command line interface. So this command line interface allows you to simply get started with developing a custom report. It requires Node.js, which any web developer should be familiar with. And to get it installed, we simply can use this install command. So let me demonstrate that. So I pass in the install command, and it will install the reporting command line tool onto my machine. That takes some time. Now it's installed, and the command is called LXR for LeanIX reporting. So when I run the command, you see it is now the same version as I have installed, and there are some basic commands. So the first command you will use is the init command, which initializes a new project. So let me run that. So what it does, it will initialize a new project and ask me some questions which I have to answer to in order to initialize the project. So we give it a name like demonstration, then a technical ID, which should follow these the notation of a Java package, and then we give it an author, a title, a description, and some other parameters which I will now leave by default. The host which I will use is our app.leanix.net instance, and the workspace I'm going to use is the this workspace. So now it asks me for an API token. Therefore, I will switch back into my browser. Here I'm logged into that workspace, and now I have to go to the administration area. And here under developers, I go into the API token section. Here I have to create a new token. I give it a description, report development, and set an expiration date for end of the year. And now save the token. It's important to copy this token right now because then it's gone. So now I can answer the question of the API token by simply passing the just created token in here. And now the project is initialized. The next step is to install the dependencies for the project, which I'm going to do now. So it now fetches the dependencies for the project from the npm repository. This is done now. And the next step is to simply start the development by using the LXR start command. So what it does now, it hosts a local development server, which will host our report and connect to the app.leanix application and show the report there. So now often this happens that the browser, in this case Chrome, rejects to show the report. This is because the report is hosted locally and should be included into a live application which is secured. So now this is what is told here in the command line. It says if the report is not being loaded, please check if it opens outside of LeanIX. So I have to click on this URL to open it outside of LeanIX. And now you see, because we hosted it locally, it is not secure for the browser, which is fine because we know what we are doing, and we just say it's okay, proceed with localhost. And if we have done that now, we can refresh our application, and now Chrome knows that localhost is okay to connect to, and the report shows up. So let's take a look at the report. So this is the report that is the default template that the LeanIX command line tool comes with. And it simply shows a bar for each fact sheet type, and the length of the bar depends on the number of fact sheets of that type. So currently it's sorted by name, but we can also sort it by count. So this is also a feature that comes with the reporting framework. Each report can define own custom dropdowns, which are shown at the top here. So this is a custom dropdown that is specified by this report. We can also use the filtering. So I can, for example, filter for all fact sheets where Peter Schmidt is subscribed to. And you see the filtering works out of the box. We can again sort this by count. And this is the default report that comes with the LeanIX reporting CLI. And this is the starting point where you can start your development from in order to develop your report. Okay, so let's start with the actual example that we want to create. Therefore, I switch to another directory where I've prepared something. So let me go back and change directory into the completion example. So here I have prepared everything. I have also initialized a new project, answered all the questions. So I can now just run LXR start to get started with the report. So this is the starting point. The report, which I have prepared now, simply prints out all the fact sheets of the workspace with their type and their ID. So this is a good point to look at the actual code and that I can explain you what is going on. So I open my code editor. And now let's take a look at the files that the LXR init command initializes. So the project is a standard Node.js project. So it comes with a package JSON, and the package JSON just defines all the important information about our project, like the name, a version, the description, and also the title and other things that we have answered during the questions it asked previously. The whole project is bundled by Webpack. So the LXR command provides a Webpack configuration, which is pretty simple, so that it bundles all the JavaScript, CSS files, and HTML files into one bundle, which then can be used to show the report. The most important files are in the source folder. So the source folder consists simply of an index.html, which is a pretty simple HTML file with simply a div tag and an ID report. This is the tag where later, where our report is then later initialized in. Then there is an index JavaScript file. This is the first file the browser will load and execute when the report loads. So what it does, it imports the LeanIX reporting library. So this is the library which talks to our LeanIX Pathfinder application. And this library is what you use in order to interact with Pathfinder, in order to get data, and in order to configure your report. Then we actually import the report itself, which is the custom report logic. This is located in another file, the report.js file, which we will take a look at later. And then the LX object is something that comes with the LeanIX reporting library. So when the library is loaded or imported, it will create this LX object in our global space, and we can use it. So the first thing you would have to do is to use the LX object and call init on it. This will initialize the report together with the reporting framework. So basically what the report does, it tells the framework that the report is started and wants to initialize. Then the framework answers with setup data. This setup data contains all the information about a workspace. For example, the view model which has information about our fact sheet types and our fact sheet colors and other configuration like translations. We then give this setup object to our report, which will make use of this setup. And then we ask the report to create a configuration. So this configuration is then passed back to the framework. With this configuration, we can say what features do we want to use from the framework, like which custom dropdowns do we want to have? Do we want to make use of the view selection? Do we want to have filtering? Can the report be exported as a PDF and so on? So in the create config method, which we will take a look later, we can basically say what we want from the framework. If we have created the configuration object, we simply call LeanIX ready to tell the framework that the report is now ready to consume data and to show itself. And we provided the config object so that the framework knows what to initialize and what we want from the framework. So at this point, I want to show you another GitHub page. This is the LeanIX reporting GitHub page, and this is where all the information about the library, the LeanIX reporting library, is hosted. And one specific thing I want to show you is the type documentation, where you can find all the information about the LeanIX object, which I have just showed you. So you can click on the LeanIX Custom Report lib link here, and it shows you all the functionality the LeanIX reporting library provides to you. Like we have seen just now, this basic workflow to initialize a report. And if we take a look at the ready function, which we just called, we see how the configuration object looks like that we have to provide to it. So here you see the settings we can set for the reporting framework, like if we allow editing of the report, which menu actions do we have, so there, which custom drop downs, do we want to allow export, do we want to allow facet filtering, and many more features. So this is a good point for developers to look at the report, at the reporting library and see the features it provides. Okay, so now let's take a look at the report itself. It's a pretty simple class, a simple JavaScript class, which receives the setup from the reporting framework and stores it into a local variable here. And then we create the configuration object. So this is a simple object where we say we want to have facet filtering, and we want to have the following attributes from the fact sheets that are filtered. So at the moment, we just want the ID and the type of a fact sheet. Then we have to provide a callback. This callback is called from the framework whenever new data is available. So the callback in our case is the render function. So the render function is called whenever there's no new data available, and it gets the data as a parameter. So with the data, which are actually fact sheets, we simply map each fact sheet to a simple HTML string and print out the type and the ID of the fact sheet, and then insert this HTML into the report node that was in our HTML file. So let me start the development server again so that we can take a look at the result. So as expected, we get a list with the application type and the application ID. And whenever we change the filter, the framework will call our render function, so basically the callback we defined, and we will render out the new data that is filtered. So just with a few lines of code, which we see here, this the report can already filter, the user can already filter the data of the report. Okay, so let's get to the next step in order to develop our example. What I would like to do now is I would like to print out the display name of the fact sheet instead of the ID. So what I have to do is I have to say, okay, additional to the ID and the type, please fetch also the display name attribute. So we add it to the list, and then the framework will also fetch the display name attribute, which we can use to print out instead of the ID. So I'm going to save this, switch back to the browser, and as you can see, we already have the new data here, and we see now the type of the fact sheet and the name. This, of course, works again with the filters, and everything is already here. So the next step is to fetch also to fetch only user groups, because our example should show a bar chart where each bar is a user group. So what I have to do now is I have to say to tell the framework that we want to allow the user only to filter for user groups. So I add this attribute to our configuration object, and I say, please set a fixed fact sheet type, which is the user group type. So I save this, and now I will refresh the browser. And as you can see, the framework now inserts a fixed filter here, which says only fact sheets of type user group are filtered. And now the user can't change to another type. So now our report is constrained to only user group fact sheets. Okay, so the next part would be to fetch for each user group also the related applications, because we want to calculate the average completion of all the applications per user group. So in order to develop this query, I will go into the GraphQL IDE, which you can find in the administration under tools, and there is the graphical tool. So here we want to develop the query which fetches the related applications per user group. So I would start with a simple query and say all fact sheets, and then say the fact sheet type is user group. And then we fetch the edges and nodes, which are the fact sheets, and just the ID of the fact sheet. So currently this query just gets the IDs of all our user group fact sheets. So what we have to do now is we have to use the ... on syntax in order to query user group specific attributes, like the relation to from your user group to the application. So for each relation, which is again edge and a node, we fetch the opposite fact sheet, which is an application in that case. So we prettify the query and execute it. So now for each user group, we also fetch the related application IDs. What we want to have from each application is the completion. So we just also fetch the completion of that fact sheet, which is an application. And we want to have the completion actually in a percentage value. So we fetch the percentage value of that completion. And so you see, for each user group, we fetch the relation to the applications, and for each application, we fetch the percentage of the completion. So what we have to do now is we have to add another attribute. So what the reporting framework basically does, it takes all our attributes, combines it with the filters that the user has set in the UI, and creates an all fact sheets query for us. So what the reporting framework basically provides is the outer part of the query, and we have to provide just the attributes, which is this part. So everything above this part is provided by the reporting framework. So what we simply have to do now is we have to get only this relation user group to application attribute with all its sub attributes and insert it here as another attribute. So what I have done now, I have used the backtick instead of a simple quote, which allows me to use a multi-line string. So I can pass in multiple lines into the string. So now we have told the framework, additional to the ID, the type, and the display name, please also fetch the relation user group to application with all the nodes related to that user group, which are application fact sheets, and for each application fact sheet, fetch the completion percentage. So what we now have to do is to print out this completion. Therefore, I have prepared some code. I will copy that in here. So this is the render relation function. What it does is it gets a fact sheet, and for that fact sheet, it goes over all the relations from user group to application, all the edges, and map each edge to the percentage value of the fact sheet. The next thing is I want to use that render relation function. Right here, I put it into a div tag and render the relations for each user group. Let me refresh that. And now you see that for each user group, in this case, the user group Australia, it prints out all the application percentages or the completion percentages for each application. So the next step is to calculate the average completion. And therefore I have prepared more code, which I am going to paste in here. So what it does, it will compute the average completion for our data. So it goes over our data, which are all the user groups, and each user group will be mapped into an object with the properties name, which is the user group display name, and a property y, which is the average group, the average completion of that user group. So this function, the compute user group completion, gets a user group and then iterates checks if it has related applications. So if the length of the edges is greater than 0, and then it will reduce all the related applications to a completion value. So what it does, it just sums up all the percentages of the related applications. And then we will divide the summed up completion value by the length of the related applications, so by the number of applications, and we get basically an average for that user group. Then I would like to render that out, and therefore I pass in another render function. So again, whenever new data is available, the reporting framework will call our callback function, which is the render function. It gives us the new data, which has the attributes we have defined in the config. Then we compute the average completion on that data. We then sort the completion by the Y value, which is the average completion over the application fact sheets. And then we will map each completion and print out simply the name, which was the user group display name, and the Y property, which is the completion average. So as you can see now, we have the user group display name and the average completion as a value printed out here. So the next step would be to visualize that using a charting library in order to draw our bar charts. We at LeanIX often use height charts, which is a charting library, and I would like to install that library now. So let me go back into the command line. I stop the server for now, and then I run an install command in order to install height charts in a specific version. So now I'm installing height charts into the project. And the next step would be to make use of height charts in order to draw a bar chart. So within our code now, I can simply import everything as height charts from the height charts library. So now we have included height charts into our report. And now I will also copy in some more code. And explain the code. So height charts basically works by providing, again, a configuration object which tells height charts how it should draw some data. So in our case, we want to draw a chart as type bar. So we want to draw a bar chart. And we want to format tooltips in a specific format. We want to have an x-axis, and on the y-axis we want to have the title average completion, and then as the data we will provide it the completion we just calculated. So this is something you would have to read up in the height charts documentation, how the configuration object looks. So I'm going to close that now. And then we take a look at the create height charts function. So this function gets the completion which we just have printed out. It maps each completion item to its name. So we get the categories. So the categories are the user group names. And then we build the height charts options object with the function I just showed. And then we call the height charts library and tell it to render a chart into the report tag, which is the tag in our HTML with the ID report. So that report is this report. And we provided the options object. So instead of printing out the completions as HTML, we now say create a high charts chart with that completion. So I save the report, and now I would start the development server again. And now I have to refresh the view. And as you can see, instead of just printing out the average completion values, we now give the completion data to the HighCharts library, which takes care of rendering it out as a bar chart. And again, the filtering works. So if I'm going to filter all the user groups where I am subscribed to, the framework will call the callback with the new data. The callback will call our render function. The render function will calculate the completions based on that data, and then finally will call HighCharts with the new data in order to draw the chart. So yeah, as you can see, with just a few lines of code and a charting library, we can pretty much show some useful data to the user. It also works with the PDF export, so let me show that. So without anything that I have to do as a report developer, this report is already prepared to be exported as a PDF. So let me export it and download it. And as you can see, we get a nice sheet with the bar chart. It says it contains our filter and our visualization of the data. So that comes out of the box for every custom report. So when we are done with the development of the report, like we are now, so our use case is finished, I would like to show you the next step in the workflow, which is the uploading of the report. So once we are done with the development, we simply call LXR upload in order to upload it to our workspace, which we have configured for this report. So what it does, it will bundle the report into a package, and that package is then uploaded into our workspace, which is located on the app.LeanIX instance. So now, as an administrator, I can go into the administration, and under developers, I have this menu entry reports. And as you can see, our report next, the completion report, it was just uploaded to LeanIX and the approval is pending. So the LeanIX approval is pending, but I can already go into the report details, which is not that nice of a UI at the moment, but we are developing on that. And you see all the information already about the report. And the most important thing is that you have a link here, which you can open, which basically shows our report again. But the important thing is now that it is included in LeanIX. So you don't have to start a local development server anymore. You simply have this link, which you can copy and share with anyone in your company in order to show them the report you just developed. You can get some feedback on the report and refine the report, upload it again, and so you can iterate on the development of the report pretty simply with other users. Okay, so much for the demonstration. Let's go back to the slides. So in the conclusion, I hope I could show you that it's easy to get started with the reporting framework. You just install the CLI tool, which will initialize a project for you that is ready and comes with a predefined report out of the box, and you can start from there. You can gain value with just a few lines of code. So if you have a specific requirement to show some data based on a specific GraphQL query or on your data in the workspace, you can gain a lot of value by providing a visualization on top of that data. And you have free choice of web technology. So I have used HighCharts now, but you can use any web visualization library you want. You can even make a 3D scene based on your data. But there is no limit and no restrictions from the LeanIX side. And yeah, we are looking forward to the reports that you guys will build in the future, and we hope we can help you there if you have questions. And yeah, these are the resources where you can go to. So the reporting CLI, the library itself, GraphQL documentation on dev.leanix.net, and also the example reports, which I just have developed. Okay, so far from the presentation and the demonstration, are there any questions?
So if you've got any questions, now would be the time to ask them. At the moment, we haven't received any, so hopefully that means that the presentation was so clear that you can get started straight away. But in case you're completely overwhelmed, don't forget you are going to get the recording, so you can re-watch it. And if after that you still have questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Now, we still haven't got any questions that have come in, so what remains to tell you is you can download the presentation slides from today's webinars from SlideShare. Just visit the LeanIX channel on SlideShare. There you can also find the slides from the previous 2 webinars. So please have a look there. And as I said, you will get the recording sometime next week. So seeing that we still haven't got any questions, thank you very much, Patrick, for your time today. Thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope you have a very nice weekend, and we hope that you will join us again in the future. Goodbye.